So everyone is really excited about the new mod flow tools, because I'm going to talk about a free flow model. My talk is about a project I'm working on together with Eduardo de Souza. And for this project, we developed a way to combine climate anomaly scenarios together with groundwater modeling ensembles to quantify predictive uncertainty. So just a quick overview. We'll start with some background information about the project, move on to the history matching process with PEST ++ IES, and then go over to the climate anomaly scenarios we used and how we implemented those to the IES setup, and of course, in the end, some results and a summary. So the project location is in Western Australia. It's an open pit heavy sands mine, and the predicted period of mining was 4.5 years. And mining will be performed with either a dredge or a drag line, which is why they need to maintain a certain water level in the pit. And mining happens in small sequences, and after backfilling happens 1 month after one sequence got mined. The main predictions of interest in this case were the amount of water they need to add or remove from the pit to maintain the water level, and the impact of mining on the groundwater level, as there's a groundwater-dependent system quite close to the mine. You can see on the right-hand side an approximation of the conceptual model. Let's see. We have on the east the hills, and on the west the Indian Ocean. The groundwater flow is roughly from east to west. There's a shallow superficial aquifer on top and a deeper aquifer below, which is partly confined, but they are connected in some areas. The system is mainly driven by the amount of rainfall. Surface water has a minor influence on the groundwater level. Both the superficial aquifer and the deeper one shown in the observed values show direction of rainfall events and also have a seasonal pattern depending on dry or wet season. Since we're in Western Australia, dry season is from November to April, roughly. Next slide. So let's move on to the history matching process. Based on this conceptual model, we built a 3D transient groundwater flow model with FeeFlow and calibrated it with PEST IES++. PEST ++ IES. Calibrated parameters were hydraulic conductivity, vertical anisotropy, porosity, storage, and for recharge, a multiplier on rainfall, and evaporation as an outflow term. We started with zone calibration with PEST GLM and used the results as initial conditions for the IES calibration, which was performed with pilot points. Each calibration period included running a steady state model using the results as initial conditions for the transient model. And overall, we are running 240 realizations, about 15,000 adjustable parameters, and 20,000 observations, spatially and temporal. So just two observations, two results. Each gray line is one realization. The red dots are the observed values, and the black lines are the 5th and 95th percentile, and the line in the middle is the ensemble mean. So you can see the ensemble covers the observed values quite good, but we still maintain a certain amount of uncertainty. Okay, so now let's move to the main part, the predictive period. The data we had for the climate anomaly scenarios were from a study the Department of Water of Western Australia published. They had 48 different GCMs and adapted those to the different regions in Western Australia. You can see on the right-hand side, this is the, oops, this was the wrong one. How do I go back? Yeah. Those are the 48 models for the region where our project site was in. And what they show is the reduction, or in this case, all of them show reduction of rainfall over the next years. And so the middle line is the 0% in all predictions which go to the left mean there's a reduction in rainfall. And what they did was chose 3 of those scenarios to represent a dry, medium, and wet scenario for predictive change in rainfall. And let's have a look at those. So the upper green line is the dry scenario, the wet scenario, which predicts a reduction of rainfall until 2100 of about 7%, while the dry scenario predicts a reduction of rainfall of up to 47% until 2100. So what you usually normally would do probably is either, if you want to be conservative, take the dry scenario, add this to your predictive model, or maybe take the medium scenario, or if you have enough budget or time, take all 3 of them and compare the results in the end. Our idea was also to include the probability of one of those scenarios actually to happen, because a dry scenario is way less likely than the median scenario, for example. And so our idea was, let's use an ensemble of different climate scenarios by using the dry and the median as the bounds, and the dry and the wet as the bounds, and the median as most likely one. Well, nice idea, but how do we combine this with the existing IES setup? Let's see. So first of all, we added a predictive rainfall time series in the FeeFlow model, just a constant seasonal variation, and added a user distribution for an anomaly factor. I will come back to that one later. For all who are only using ModFlow, user distribution in FeeFlow is mainly an empty array with x, y, z, and you can add a parameter to that. Then we also added a time series for the wet, medium, and dry scenario we were already talking about in the slide before. The only difference is, in this case, it's not a reduction of 7%, but 0.93 to represent this factor. Then in PEST control file, we already had from the history matching period had the distribution of the rainfall multiplier and the parameter distribution for the outflow term. And for the predictive period, we added another parameter for rainfall anomaly, which had an initial condition of 0 and upper and lower bound of -1 and 1. So to bring those parts together, and we added this formula to the recharge formula in FeeFlow, which all it in the end does is checking this value. Each realization gets one of those values written to the user distribution. And then depending if that's above or below 0, we're either more on a dry scenario or on a wet scenario. On a wet scenario, dry scenario. And for example, a 0 would exactly match the median scenario, and a multiplier of 1 would end up being the most wet scenario. And then the anomaly factor gets calculated and added to the recharge formula to get this normally distributed climate anomaly. So let's have a look at some results. How does this look in the end? What you can see here is groundwater recharge in millimeters per day over the predictive period. Each gray line, again, is one realization, and the red line is the ensemble mean. You can see in general, there's as expected, the groundwater recharge is declining over the years. And at the closer look, too far, here. And at this zoomed area, you can see the different variations between the different ensembles realizations. But of course, this is the combined uncertainty of parameter uncertainty and climate anomaly uncertainties. So let's have another look. It's again groundwater recharge, but this time millimeters per year. Each of those blue dots is one realization. And you can see the later in time we get, the higher the uncertainty of, oops, where's the pointer there? The higher the uncertainty gets, because amount of groundwater recharge can vary in the end between 50 millimeters a year or 100 millimeters a year. And if we combine this to a predictive scenario which only uses the constant rainfall time series, there's quite an amount of uncertainty we're missing if we're only using the normal rainfall time series. Even if we would have used on, let's say, the median scenario, you probably would see the amount of recharge goes down, but you still have the same amount of uncertainty. So yeah, without the climate anomaly scenarios, you could assume an amount of recharge between 85 millimeters a year or 110 millimeters a year. So, but in the end, we were interested in what happens to the groundwater-dependent ecosystem. So let's have a look at groundwater levels. Those are observation points below this ecosystem. And so what you see here in blue is the predictive scenario, including the climate anomaly scenarios, and in orange, the scenario without, or just considering a constant rainfall time series. And in the end of the predictive period, we almost always had minimum 1 meter difference of groundwater levels, only based on including a reduction of rainfall or not. So on top of that, in the end, we will also have difference due to mining, which is not included in there. So to sum this up, I think the using an ensemble of different climate scenarios help to understand the reaction of the groundwater level depending on the amount of recharge we will have, and also understand the amount of uncertainty which is within those the different amount of recharge we can have. And at the same time, also had the advantage of, instead of having to run 2 or 3 or multiple different climate scenarios, we could only run one predictive scenario, include the information of all of those scenarios. So we can have a look at, okay, what's the worst case scenario, 50 millimeters a year recharge, or what's the most likely one? And so this is a way you don't have to use the most conservative scenario, for example, but still maintain the information of in which area you're actually moving. So as an outlook, I think in general this is an approach which can be used in multiple different projects. But of course you need to have at least 3 different climate scenarios to create an ensemble. And at the same time, so the information we used was only based on reduction of rainfall. So we didn't include an increase of evaporation, for example, or higher rainfall runoff values because of drier soils or something like that. That's it. Thank you.
This is a question out of pure ignorance about climate models. Based on your experience, do these models show recharge changes like in span of years or decades? Because the reason I'm interested is a lot of times we make capture zones for our clients with models, right? And that could change, increase or decrease if the future recharge were to change. Just trying to get a feel for what is that span? Do we worry in terms of decades? Like, if you had any thoughts about, based on your experience, curious to know that.
Okay, just to get your question right. You mean how long the climate anomaly scenarios we're predicting in future, or?
Or the change, does it get significant in, like within like 5 years time intervals, or 10-year time intervals, or 20-year time intervals? Like, when does that delta in the recharge becomes significant? Sorry, very ambiguous question.
That highly depends, I guess, on the area where you are, because recharge depends on your hydrogeology as well. So I don't know if there's a general approach of saying after this amount of years, a reduction in recharge will have an influence. Because in this case, we had a really flat topography. It's completely different if you have sorry, I can't really give a value on.
I think if
but what you definitely could see is, like, in the first few years, it took a while until actually the groundwater levels showed a difference between the different scenarios. But that was based on the amount of reduction of rainfall we added to the model.
Right.
So
I think it was maybe in the decades time frame when you saw the reduction in recharge, right? There was a graph that you presented, Johanna, that showed the change in recharge over time. So I couldn't read the x-axis, but I'm thinking it's tens of years. It's fairly typical. All right. Thank you, Johanna. That was really good. Yeah.